Hi guys, and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to test how to assess the attribute of a component. Most likely the props pass to a component and then pass on to the attributes. So for example, I have this component here, a nav link component, which renders a link, and it has some attributes with it. So those are the attributes that we want to test today. Right, so I have my test here, the to-do test, and I have the test already running. So you can already see that Jess is saying that these are the tests that I have to do. All right, okay, so let's quickly jump into the testing. Right, so the first case that we want to test is it should render a link. So we expect that there should be a link in the component, or it should render a link onto the page, which is quite easy to test because we've been doing that for all our videos. Right, so let's render the components. So we need to first render the components and then pass in some props. So you can see here that these are the props that this component expects, and all of them are required. So obviously we need to pass all of these props to this component. So the first one is the to. So in this case, where should it go to? The next one is the content. So what should be the content of the link, or what should be written in the link? So let's say the home, and finally active. Right, so by default these are the props that I want to pass to the component for this test. Oh, sorry, we should get rid of the to do. Okay, so first we want to assert that there is a link in the page. So we can do that by using the get by row. So get by row, then using the link. So get by row from React testing library, then we pass in what the link. So this will look for any link in the page, but we want the test to be a bit more specific, and we say that the link should have a name, or its content should be what? Home, because we know that we are passing in home here, and that will be placed over here as the content. Right? So we expect the links content should be home, and it should be in the document. Right, so we have that, and let's check our test, and it passes beautifully. So we are done with that test. Obviously nothing extravagant is going on. We just needed to assert that this particular link actually exists in the page, which is perfectly fine. So now we are moving on to the next test, which is to test the href attribute. So this is the first attribute that we are going to test on this particular link component. Right, simply because we are passing in a prop which will then be assigned to the href attributes from here. Right, so the to will then be passed on to the href, and it should actually have the value of whatever we pass to the to prop. Okay, so let's first get rid of our to do here, and then bring in our test. So obviously we're going to render this component, right, and the next thing is to then grab the link, and since we already have written the first test, having that, so we don't need to write it all again, just copy and paste. But we are going to change the assertion over here to actually check the attribute itself, to actually ensure that the attribute does have the value that we are looking for. And to do that, we use the to have attribute. So to have attribute is going to check the attributes that we are going to pass in here to ensure that it has a specific value. So as you can see, it allows you to check if a given element has an attribute or not, which is true. So in this case, we want to check the href attribute. Let's bring this here. So just doing this will check to see if that the component has an href attribute. So you can go and check in our test, and it passes simply because the link does have an href attribute. So if we do remove the link, so obviously we can see that the test then what fails because there is no href attribute, right? So let's bring back our attribute because we need it for our test, right? So this same function there to have attributes also takes in a second parameter, which will be the value that's given to that attribute. So in this case, the first parameter is the attribute that we are looking for, then the second one is the value of the what attribute that you're trying to check. So in this case, we expect that it should just be a slash. I think it's a, is there forward slash or backward slash? I don't know, but all we know that is a slash. Right, so we check that. So we run our test. Oops. So we run the test. And it passes, right? So if we were to bring in a different what to value, we then run our test to see, and it fails, right? So it fails because the attributes do not match. Here has a slash home, but the assertion is checking for just the slash, right? So let's go back and remove the home and then get back our original case. Let's move this here, get more spacing. Awesome, so it passes. Now, so that's it. So if you want to test for any attribute, you can just use the to have attribute function, which is provided by the React testing library to assert the attribute itself. All right. So the next attribute that we are going to test is the class name attribute, which is very common in React applications. I have never seen any React application that does not make use of the class name, because basically if you want to make designs or add some styling to your application, to the React application, you most definitely going to make use of the class name. So definitely this is very important for us to actually test. All right, so how are we going to test the class name, right? So we need to perform some assertion here. So it should ensure that this there should be an active class when the component is actually active, meaning that when the component the active prop is true. So if it's true, we expect that there should be a class of active given to the link, and if it's not, then we definitely going to have no active class, right? So this is more likened to scenarios where you are designing the navigation of the website. So when you click on a link, you make the link active to indicate to the user that wherever they are is active, or where the page that they are on, that is the current page that is selected in the navigation bar. So giving the user a bit of feedback to whatever action that they are taking place. Okay, so back onto the test. So let's get rid of the to do, and let's add the test implementation. So I'm going to bring back the render. So as you can see, mostly when you're writing tests is kind of like copy and paste. Just copy this, paste it here, copy this, paste it here. You keep doing that most of the time. Alright, so let's move on to let's copy the second one, that's the to have attributes. But in this case, we are not going to use the to have attribute, but we are rather going to use a more specific assertion, and that is to have class. To have class. And you can see the description says that check whether the given element has certain classes within its class attributes. Right, so you want to check that there is a particular class given to that component, whether it's a number of classes or it's a single class. You can use to have class, to check those things. Okay, so in this case, we know that I want to check that there is an active class. So let's save that. And it passes, right? So we know that when the nav link is active, there will be an active class. But what if we make the active false? What happens then? Right, so it fails. So if our active is false, that means that particular link is not highlighted or has not been clicked on yet. Definitely there won't be any active class. But if it is clicked on, you can just set it to true, and it will have the active class assigned to it, which is perfectly nice. Fine. Right, so basically that's it for testing the attributes of a component. So so you can use either to have attributes or to have class. There are others that we could use. I think well, there's quite a lot, but a few of them is to contain HTML. So if there's an HTML inside the components, you can also test the accessibility of the components. So to have an accessible name, the accessible description, so you can use any of these to test the various attributes of the component or of the elements. So basically that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to see how we are going to test React components that make API requests using either Axios or the native JavaScript fetch function. So that's it for this video. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.